I'm Andrea Gulacci. I'm a director for policy and partnerships here in the Sense Analytic Management Center. So my responsibility is primarily to engage with the European institutions on the policy side and with our partners, be it industry, societal, environmental, consumers, on the partner side, which I'm sure you are exposed to in your technical committee work. So we'll show you now a bit on the practicalities, if you want, the added value, why it's important that we engage our partners, and then also some tips and tricks and certain tools that maybe are helpful for you to use in your daily technical committee life. Chiara, our guest, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chiara Giovannini. I work for ANEC. ANEC is the association representing consumers in standardization. I know some of you already, and it's a pleasure to see you again and to meet so many new technical officers. It will be my pleasure, together with Andrea and Raisa, to explain better to you what is a societal stakeholders and what is an Annex 3 organization. If there is something you need to take away this evening, is to know what an Annex 3 organization is. And we will test later on.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Raisa. Maybe I'm too tall to stand. Sorry. I'm Raisa Soares. I'm a team member of Andrea. Andrea is my director. We are in the policy and partnership team. And I hope we're able to provide some very useful information, myself more on the practical side. As a TVO, it will be very useful for you when you contact CCMC. And yeah, maybe we get started.
Let's get started. And of course, please, questions, clarifications, that's why we're here. And we hope to answer a lot of your questions and your practical applications today. The core of the reasoning, if you want, behind us working incredibly closely with the Annex 3 organization and partner organization is the inclusivity of the European standardization system, is our unique really value of making sure that everybody is engaged and involved and contributes to the technical standardization work. It's part of our strategy, which I'm sure you heard during the day, our Senate Analytic Strategy 2030, is part of what sets the European standardization system apart from other standard systems. It's really the inclusivity, and that is something that is unique and core to our values. And it's also something that we really should pay attention to. And the inclusivity of the system is, of course, not only part of our particular, Senate Analytic strategy, but it's also part of the European Standardization Regulation, which references the Annex 3, like Chiara said. So that's part of the takeaway and the things that we will share with you to understand and to capture better. It's also part of the European Standardization Strategy that was issued last year, which very much insists on the inclusivity and the openness of the European standardization system. So having the Annex 3 colleagues with us this evening, having the Annex 3 participation in your technical committees is core to what we stand for as Senate Analytic. And that is really something that we need to pay extra attention to make sure that our standardization work is inclusive, is transparent, that all voices are heard, or that maybe gaps are noticed when you miss maybe a consumer voice in your technical committee, an environmental voice in your technical committee. We have the tools and the mechanism in place to get those experts on board and contribute to your work. Effective participation, the regulations sets it out very, very clearly. What effective participation is. It's what we as European standardization organizations are invited to do. We need to facilitate, to encourage, to make sure that there is effective participation and representation of societal, of civil society, of environmental, of consumer, and SME representation in our technical work. And this is where the collaboration or the special partnership we have with Annex 3 comes in place. And that is something that in the background, as part of our toolkit now, as standardization experts, as technical committee experts, technical committee chairs, technical committee secretaries, we need to have that in the back of our mind. Annex 3 are an important component of making the European standardization work and our European standards to be representative, all-inclusive, and market relevant. So we say it, the standardization regulation says it as well. So I think we have the two components that are complementary to each other. Now, who are the Annex 3 organizations? Maybe this should have been a quiz, a poll, to ask you if you know who the Annex 3 organizations are. But there are 4 organizations. We have ANEC with us here today. We do this on a rolling basis with our partners from the Annex 3 organization. So when we have the trainings for the technical body officers, we always invite one of the Annex 3 organizations to join us so that you have also the real voice, the practical voice from the Annex 3 organization. So we have the consumers represented by ANEC, we have the environmental represented by ECOS, we have the workers represented by ETUC, and we have the SMEs, so small and medium-sized enterprises, represented by SBS. You will see in our presentation they have very specific, very clearly defined rights and empowerment in the system for them to contribute to European standardization work. And that's the parts that we need to know, that we need to apply, that we need to enable and facilitate. But these are the Annex 3 organizations, the same ones recognized in Regulation 1025. So this is who we're talking about these 4 organizations. We have our cooperation with the Annex 3 organization covers, if you want, 2 layers. It can be at 2 levels. There is a more political governance cooperation with Annex 3, and then a more technical, practical cooperation and contribution to technical work. Here we'll focus more on the technical work, but the participation in governing bodies is just to give you the sense of the scope, of the wide scope of Annex 3 contribution to our work. So they do contribute and participate in the technical boards, but they also participate in the policy groups that we have. They also report through a dedicated group to the presidential committee. So there are several layers to this collaboration we have with the Annex 3. It's just to give you that sense of importance and also collaboration and close engagement, I think, daily engagement, weekly engagement we have with the Annex 3 organizations. Maybe you want to take this from here on the practicalities of ANEC. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Would you be as kind as to turn the slides for me?
I can turn the slide.
Thank you very much. So ANEC is the association representing consumers in standardization. The acronym is more or less that. Don't ask me exactly what it stands for because we never discovered that. But it's a French acronym, and there is something about consumer norms and association, more or less. That's how it is. Our job is to represent the consumer point of view. Of course, you have consumers at the national level sometimes, but most of the time you don't have consumers. Consumers don't have the possibility of associating themselves at the national level and being present everywhere in Europe because of lack of resources. Therefore, this is why we have an association representing them at the European level. So we represent consumers, we develop positions, we have experts coming, but not from all the countries, but the experts that are in the countries can use the positions that we are developing at the European level. It's a system of solidarity, if you want. Next slide. And the job that we do is about standardization, but also it's about conformity assessment, market surveillance, and the legislation linked to the so that's the continuum. I met some of you during the coffee break, and we were discussing about product testing, about market surveillance. Standards are useful for that. They are useful for putting product on the market. Sometimes they are used in an important manner, although they stay voluntary. They are considered as essential to put products on the market, but they are also used for taking out products from the market when market surveillance authorities are using them, for example. We are active in several technical committees at the European level. I hope that there are some ANEC representatives in your TCs, or there will be. And we are also active at the international level. Next slide. We have a small video. If there is time, otherwise we will leave it to the slides will be distributed, I guess. Huh? So let's move to the next slide. The structure of ANEC is very similar to the structure of each organization, either of Senelec, because we are both based in Brussels. Well, the three organizations are based in Brussels. So the structure is very similar in your countries as well. We are an NGO, we have a General Assembly, we have a board, those kind of structure. What might be interesting for you to know is that we have one member per country, even if there are more than there is more than one consumer organization per country. We ask the organizations to elect one representative for each country, and we have the same geographical spread as Senelec. Our statutes are mirroring the statutes of Senelec in terms of consumer participation from the same countries. The sectors that we cover are very broad. Consumers affairs is nowadays covering everything. Since the liberalization of telecoms, for example, 30 years ago or even 40 years ago, it was the post office and everything was public. Nowadays, everything is private. So it becomes a consumer issue. Next. We are active in Senelec, but also in ETSI. You know that ETSI is the third European station organization dealing with electronic communications. And we are active at the ISO level. You might have heard the acronym ISO COPOLCO. COPOLCO stands for the Consumer Policy Committee of ISO. Next. We are working at the technical level. As mentioned, in some of your TCs, you might have already a consumer representative from ANEC, or you might have in the future. We can participate in a technical committee in terms of observers. So we don't have a voting right because we are not part of a national delegation, but we can submit comment, we can get meeting documents. At the working group level, of course, everyone is an expert, and the ANEC expert is an ANEC expert, according to the national experts. But we don't have a national delegation to report back. We have the ANEC delegation. And we can submit comments, as I was mentioning, during all the phases. They have to be treated equally, generally comments are both at the working group level, committee draft, but also during the inquiry, eventually the formal vote. And we have a specific right, which is similar to a right to vote, but it's not a right to vote. Shall I explain it, or will you do it, Andrea? No, I'll do it.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you explain it from yours.
Yeah.
And then we reinforce on how it should be applied.
That's fine. I was mentioning that we have a European association representing consumers at the European level because we don't have the same at the national level in your national delegations. If you are familiar already with the system, you know that in national delegations, you should have all the stakeholders represented, and the national delegations should represent the views of all the stakeholders. The reality of the matter is that NGOs in general, representing consumers, civil society, they are not present at the national level. So many national delegations don't have this diversity of views. That's why we have the stakeholders at the European level complementing, such as ANEC and the other Annex 3 organizations. And this complementing the view of the national level takes the shape during the voting of a standard of a so-called right of opinion. We don't have a right to vote. We can submit comment, but we can express our opinion, which is favorable or not favorable, on a standard alongside the national delegations, alongside the voting. This has been done in order to give visibility, again, because at the national level, the diversity of voices might not be present, and it's mainly for economical reasons, as you can imagine. And this right of opinion is taking the shape so far of a Word document, of an attachment that we hope we are going to modernize very soon, and that has to be distributed during the vote. You are going to get it from CCMC. It has to be distributed to the technical committee, eventually to the working group, and it has to be considered. It is a formality, but it's an important one because it adds legitimacy, it adds democracy to a system which unfortunately sometimes doesn't present a diversity of views at the national level. I think I've presented the views of in a more in an objective manner, but I'm happy to be corrected.
No, thank you very much, Chiara. I think that would be really interesting because, of course, from a practical point of view, Chiara explained this is it is a decision that was taken by our technical board. So the right for opinion didn't just happen. It was a request from the Annex 3, from the societal stakeholders. It was discussed with the members. It was approved and implemented. As Chiara mentioned, it's on par with a vote without being a vote. It needs to be treated by the technical committee and taken into account. But I think maybe it's useful to mention, and Raisa can go a bit into the shift that we're doing it so that it's easier for you to receive easier for the Annex 3 to submit it and easier for the technical committees to address it.
In case you have an opinion, how do you submit this directly to the DC or?
Sorry, no, very good question.
So it's a form for the time being, a Word document where it's favorable, not favorable. There is the reference of the standard. It is sent to CCMC. They centralize it in a repository, and it's a DBT address, by the way, that we are using. And then DBT, the person in charge, will transmit it to the technical committee in charge of that standard during the vote. You will receive it for the next 2 months, I believe, still as an attachment. And I can tell you that there are dozens of opinions per week. So it's really something quite not frequent. And the idea now is to make it part of the online ballot.
Yes. Yes, exactly. In Sen, very important to say, because as you will get used to it, Sen and Sen are like a very different, and rules and tools and everything. But in Sen, we're currently working with the process of automating this. So it means that in a similar way, let's say, as comments are submitted via the e-balloting platform, the Annex 3 will be able to submit their opinions there, and you will be able to see when you generate the voting report in the tool, all the opinions, the documents, because they're allowed also to put this form that Chiara is mentioning attached. So it will be streamlined and easier, and I think more transparent for the entire process. And an interesting thing is that the opinions will be visible while the ballot is still open. So any vote that is casted or any comment that will be submitted can also be based on the opinions that are there before, let's say, the vote is closed. So, yes.
Some success stories, or
yes, again, you will get the slides, you will better understand what we do. And there are some examples of the standard we have improved. Again, during the coffee break, I share with some of you our ideas to also improve additional standards. Perhaps what is important for you to know is why there is this element which is very different from at the ISO and the IC level. If you are a secretary to an ISO TC, you don't have that. And the reason is that at the European level, of course, we have a very democratic approach to everything. We are democracies and we want to be inclusive. But also an important part of the standards are harmonized standards, the standards that are providing presumption of conformity with the legislation. You understand that those specific standards need to be developed in a very inclusive manner. And this is why there is a big difference compared to the international level, for example, where there is also a wish to have inclusiveness, but is not structured like it is in Europe, and it's not codified like it is in Europe because we also have legislation about it. You can just go through the slides, Andrea. We worked a lot on the standards on the safety of domestic appliances, which are harmonized standards, again, to make them safer for all consumers. In the past, the scope and the forward of the standards were saying that those standards were not taking into account the safety of infirm people. This is something that we campaigned a lot against. And the next slide. We also work on the first harmonized standard on digital services for the accessibility of website. This is something that also, it's not well known, but in Europe, we have a harmonized standard on the accessibility of website. We also worked a lot, the next slide, well, it was before, but on the safety of noise limits in music players. But now I think I will give the floor to Raisa. Yeah.
So some practical tips in regards to Annex 3. Any access that they're supposed to have, they're supposed to be requested to CCMC, and they receive access in the GD or global directory, as we call, and not via the NCs or NSPs. And global directory on the SEN side, and it's EMS on the Senelec side. As they do not belong to a country, they are not supposed to be appointed by the NSP or the NCs. They are representing, they come through Europe under Regulation 1025, so it's with us. Interesting to mention is in TCs, there's supposed to be 2 representatives, and in working groups, maximum up to 3 representatives. But we have our own internal coordination for the accesses, but it can be that the requests come via the TC secretary, for instance, and this is supposed to be sent to CCMC. There are specific rights and obligations for Annex 3, and they are all underlined in the internal regulations part 2 and also in Guide 25. Annex 3 are considered partners, and we have like our partnership agreement, but because they fall under Regulation 1025, they are different. They have different rights than other partners. They have a partnership agreement with SEN and Senelec. For instance, Annex 3 has the right to comment during inquiry, formal vote, and also the right to the opinion. And this is not something that other partners have the right. So they have more rights. Let's put it like that. And yeah, the opinion mechanism, which Chiara mentioned, and I explained that soon enough it will be automated and digitized. I would recommend having a look in SENBOSS. You have pages on Guide 25. The opinion mechanism is also a page in SEN and Senelec BOSS. And yeah, internal regulations is also there. It's very useful. Those are all very useful documents. Internal regulations part 2, you have descriptions of every role and what happens in every committee. So it's a very useful document in case because I think is a lot of information for one day, but everything is outlined there. And I think now it's Andrea. Yes.
I think just to wrap it up, I think that's the important bit is indeed to take away the rights of Annex 3. The fact that we're here in CCMC to support you if you have any requests or a question. We're very strong advocates of the importance to have Annex 3 organizations contributing to the system. You saw the examples Chiara gave as well of how standards have been improved with comments and feedback from consumers. But of course, the same happens with the environmental organization, the same happens with the workers, the same happens with small and medium-sized enterprises. And of course, on the Annex 3 organizations, they have the mandate from the European Commission and EFTA to represent these voices in our European standardization work. So we need to make this a win-win collaboration. I mentioned the governing level contribution. It's just for you to know as well that in addition to the technical, so the BTs, the technical collaboration we have with Annex 3, our collaboration with Annex 3 is also framed by 2 specific groups that are reporting to the Presidential Committee. We have a group on societal stakeholders and we have a group on SMEs. It's a more political exchange, it's a more strategic exchange. We look at what policies are coming up, where do we need to join forces. We look at the European standardization strategy. We look at points for improvement for the system, for SEN and Senelec, where we need to engage. We also look at joint policy and communication opportunities, which we have quite a few on. And of course, also on how we, as SEN and Senelec, can deliver on our strategic goal to be more inclusive in the future. There are a few e-learning tools available for you to dig deeper, if you want, into the Annex 3 collaboration, into the Annex 3 tools, the needs that they have, and the needs they represent in our work for societal stakeholders, for SMEs. We also have a sequence of guides, of course, of toolboxes. Raisa already mentioned Guide 25, but we also have Guide 17 for SMEs. So there is a lot of information at your disposal to use. But we're also here, and we also have webinars. So, I mean, we do realize that it can be information overflow, and we're also trying ourselves to look at how can we make information and this guidance more digestible, more easy accessible for you. You have the same information probably coming in at the national level, international. So that's part of what we're doing as well with Els, who's in my team as well, for the trainings on how we can make this a bit more useful for you. Do not ever hesitate to reach out to us. So that's why we're here in Brussels as well, to support you. Of course, the National Standards Organization, national committees have dedicated points as well for societal support, for SME support. And I think that's a good network to also be aware of and use and reach out to. The takeaways, Annex 3, covered by the Regulation 1025, and a very important partner in our work, and someone that we should collectively engage with. And also, if you notice that no one is engaged in your technical committee from the Annex 3 organizations, it's good to flag it up, because we do have this direct link and collaboration with them here in Brussels. Inclusiveness makes standards better, of course, for everyone. We're all consumers at the end of the day. We're all concerned by environmental aspects. So I think that's something that goes without saying. And then, of course, the tools and guidance documents that are available for you.